Well, thank you very much, everybody. And what a wonderful performance by Miri Ben-Ari, the hip-hop violinist. I gotta say, Hebrew school was never quite like that. It is quite an honor to be here with so many of you. And on behalf of everyone connected with this museum, I want to thank you and I want to welcome you with great joy. Because we gather today not to mourn a people, but instead to celebrate a choice made by survivors of the Holocaust, the founders of this museum. As it has taken shape, I have been privileged to get to know the history of the Holocaust through their personal experience. These are not simply Jewish stories or Polish stories or Catholic stories or gay and lesbian stories or the story of any other single group that was targeted during that time. You see, these are stories about mankind in all its dimensions. There were tormentors and there were victims. Some stood by and some offered refuge, and a few, a precious few, risked everything so strangers could live. The Holocaust is more than 60 years in the past, yet it presents to us a simple truth. The experience of millions of people, stirring courage, knowing indifference, unthinking cruelty, and gentle kindness, captures all the various elements of character that live within each of us. To be sure, none of us is born a monster, but somewhere within us lies that potential. Sometimes we allow our coarser natures too comfortable a place alongside our fundamental goodness. In this, the survivors teach us, there is not sadness, but possibility, because we can choose which it will be, the darkness or the light. And this building, this memorial, will remind us of those choices, and it will implore us to the right choice, the survivor's choice. Presented with loss, survivors chose life. Presented with heartbreak, survivors chose hope. Presented with tragedy, survivors chose to teach, to testify. And by that testimony, by this testament, they say to all of us, in my parents' memory, so my children will remember. Let our past be better known, they say, that our future be better lived. They have chosen the light, and now they challenge us to do the same. In the large ways, of course, by standing against genocide around the world, but in the smaller ways, in the small ways too, in our own lives. To speak up when we hear the ethnic slur or see the bully tormenting the victim. To choose to be an upstander, not a bystander. With each choice we make, we build a world that is worthy of the survivor's legacy. We gather today not to mourn, but to celebrate a choice and to promise to answer the survivor's call to choose the light joyfully, ever and always. Now I'd like you to join me in taking a moment to thank the survivors. I would like to acknowledge some of the officials here today. I'm going to apologize in advance because I know with a crowd this size, I'm going to miss some people. But from our federal government, U.S. Senator Roland Burris and Representatives Melissa Bean, Bill Foster, Mark Kirk, Mike Quigley, and Jan Schakowsky, Susan Scher, President Obama's liaison to the Jewish community, Illinois Secretary of State Jesse White, Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan, Illinois Comptroller Dan Hines, State Senate President John Cullerton, our own local members of the Illinois General Assembly, Jeff Schoenberg, Beth Colson, and Julie Hamos, numerous other members of the Illinois General Assembly, Senator Hunter, Representatives Feigenholtz, Franks, Hamos, Lang, Mathias, May, Nekritz, and Turner. I need a deep breath. Cook County Board President Todd Stroger and County Forest Preserve District Commissioner Goslin, our own local commissioner Larry Suffredin, Morton Grove Mayor, a hero of mine, Mayor Creer, and Evanston Mayor Morton, and members of the International Diplomatic Corps, including, very impressively, representatives of Israel, Germany, Japan, Poland, the Czech Republic, Ukraine, Venezuela, Serbia, and representatives from Holocaust and human rights centers from throughout the world. Once again, please give them all a round of applause. Several years ago, just before he died, Cardinal Joseph Bernardine asked a rabbi if he would conduct a memorial to him, for him, when he passed. Having a rabbi perform such a service for a cardinal would be unprecedented. But to Cardinal Bernardine, a great man of peace, it made perfect sense. Because the rabbi that he chose, the one that he asked personally, was his friend, Rabbi Herman Schallman. He knew that few people have done as much to bring understanding among those of different faiths as Rabbi Schallman. Today, fittingly, the rabbi gives our invocation. President of the Chicago Board of Rabbis, he is also a member of the Catholic Jewish Scholars Dialogue. Rabbi Emeritus at Emmanuel Congregation, he also serves on the Chicago Human Relations Commission. Always a teacher, Rabbi Schallman has brought his message of fundamental decency to people of all backgrounds and beliefs at institutions, seminaries, and universities around the world. Today, it is my great honor to have him here and our great honor to have him give the invocation for this ceremony, my very good friend, Rabbi Herman Schallman.
We have been summoned here today to dedicate an ingeniously designed building which will house services and departments that will spread the lessons and the hope that we can derive from them, not only here, but throughout the whole world. But we need to be aware that we are not here only to dedicate. We all stand on sacred ground. Sacred because of the millions of European Jewish children, the millions of European Jewish women, the millions of European Jewish men whose lives were most cruelly snatched from them. The raging torrent of time has moved us way beyond those days of indescribable agony and pain. And yet, our minds are benumbed. We seek to comprehend why they died, how they died, But no matter how much we ponder and research, no matter how many articles and books we write or read, we are still overwhelmed by incomprehension of this radical evil. But this we do know with profound certainty, that we must be their witnesses, their voices, because their sounds, which they would have used to speak, to sing, to pray, were throttled in their very throats. We know with a certainty beyond all question that it is up to us to guarantee that the Jewish people will never die, but will live creatively and for purposes and directions of their choice. Purposes and directions that are embedded for us in holy ancient words. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehecheyanu, v'kiyamanu, v'higyanu lazman hazeh. Most gratefully we acknowledge in your presence, O our God, that you have kept us alive, established us, and thus made it possible for us to be present and to celebrate this great, this sacred day. Amen. Amen.
Dedicated to educating the minds, elevating the spirits, and illuminating the souls of its young choir members, the Soul Children of Chicago have performed throughout the world for audiences on 4 continents, including the White House. We are pleased to present Walter Whitman and the Soul Children of Chicago performing America the Beautiful.
When we say, God bless America. Now, this is Sunday morning for us. We say, God bless. If you can just raise your hand, it says, God, we want you to bless our nation. Bless the people. Bless all of us. We want to say, God bless America. So now raise your hands like this. It says, God bless America. Go. There's something wonderful in this room. God bless. No more hatred. No more jealousy. No more killing. When you know you got something, this is an awesome country. It's an awesome nation. Everybody that believes that we're in a blessed place. That's America. My home. Sweet home. Yeah. My home. My home. No, come on, we just say it like this. My home. Pull it up. Wow.
Among the lessons of the Holocaust is that government officials can be forces for evil as well as for good. We recall that 32 years ago, the brave Skokie mayor, Al Smith, a Catholic, rallied the entire community to resist the threatened Nazi march. In the same tradition, the current generation of Skokie village leadership has given us several role models. Chief among them is Skokie's current mayor. A decade ago, he sat down with our then museum president, Lisa Derman, a resistance fighter and survivor. The mayor scanned a pile of papers on his desk and pointed to a map, and a point on that map 200 feet to the east of us. And he declared, "This is where you should build your museum, and I will help you do it." During the past 10 years, the mayor never took his eye off the ball. He worked with the village board of trustees and the superb professional team which serves the village, including village manager Al Rigoni and village corporation counsel Pat Hanley, to secure this site for the new museum. Mayor Van Dusen, you are truly a man of vision, of strength, and of wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our own Skokie Mayor, George Van Dusen.
Thank you, JB, I very much appreciate those kind and generous words. Mr. President, Mr. Wiesel, Senator, Congressman, Governor, dignitaries, friends all, welcome to Skokie, Illinois, home of the new world-class Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. I've been waiting for nearly 10 years to utter that greeting. And as I've watched this marvel arise over these years, I assure you it's been well worth the wait.
We are privileged to have with us today several notable speakers who I know you're eager to hear, so I'll take some advice that my father gave me many years ago. Be bright, be brief, be gone. I'll take that good advice and will only take a minute or so of your time. I've been asked on many occasions over this past decade, why Skokie? Why not a larger population center? My answer is simple, but shared. It was meant to be. As you're all aware, I'm sure, in the 1970s, the largest number of Holocaust survivors outside Israel lived in Skokie, making our village an inviting target for hate mongers. Until 1977, these survivors, like all of our residents, lived quiet lives involved with work and family. Then the American Nazi Party sought to disrupt that peaceful existence by demanding permission to march in our village. Our community, Jew and non-Jew, led by Mayor Albert J. Smith, rallied against this invasion, not as a denial of the haters' First Amendment rights, but as an affirmation of our determination to never again be silent in the face of evil. That march never took place, but a movement led by survivors like Erna Gans, Lisa and Anna Derman, and Sam Harris, along with their legions of supporters in our community, was galvanized. They were an immovable force in their dedication to the creation of an Illinois Holocaust Museum. The growth of the museum, from its modest beginnings on Main Street to this hallowed hall, designed by world-renowned architect Stanley Tigerman, represents a triumph of the spirit of good over evil, of light over darkness, first in World War II, and then again a second time over the brown shirts in Skokie in 1977-78. But to preserve this spirit of good, we must remember what could happen if we falter. And we must teach the dark terrors of the past and the steps toward peace and freedom to our children. The Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center demonstrates that enduring intention. On behalf of the village of Skokie, it's been a singular personal pleasure for me, as well as all of our elected officials and staff, to have worked with you on this project. Thanks to all of you, from the hundreds of volunteers to the many donors, large and small, to the friendly and competent administrative staff, and of course, to our inspiration and the motivating force, the survivors, for this magnificent gift to us today and to future generations of people all over the globe. Thank you, and please enjoy the celebration this afternoon.
Please welcome the president of the Jewish United Fund, Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago, Stephen Nassiter.
Thank you. Today is a great day for our city, our region, our state, and our country. Though the messages and services of this museum and education center is for all people, today's opening is a source of special pride for the Jewish community of Chicago. And on behalf of that community, I salute all who helped make this day possible, especially our Chicago survivor community, and special acknowledgments to my friends J.B. Pritzker, Sam Harris, and Rick Hershout, who thought big, maintained focus, provided the leadership that inspired us all to get us to this day. I am also thrilled that this Holocaust Center is the newest beneficiary agency of the JUF Federation of Metropolitan Chicago. The synergy and potential for this institution to interact and take its place within the broad and vibrant constellation of Jewish community agencies and services only adds to our collective status and capacity. Today's date, April 19th, is the 66th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, a heroic event of great significance. Mordecai Analevich and the leaders of the Jewish resistance in other ghettos and in the forest knew that they were reshaping Jewish history when they attacked their Nazi oppressors. In his words, and I quote, "The main thing, the dream of my life was realized. The Jewish self-defense in the Warsaw Ghetto became a fact." With these words, the 1,873-year era of Jewish powerlessness, dating from the collected suicide at Masada, ended. 5 years later, Jewish sovereignty returned to the land of Israel, and never again will Jews be led to slaughter. That truth is also an important part of this institution's message. Unfortunately, at the same time that we celebrate the opening of an institution of tolerance, enlightenment, respect for all people, we live at a time when the new anti-Semitism, masked in the guise of anti-Zionism, is loud and ugly. Who would have believed that this year on the streets of our beloved Chicago, signs being held by children participating in anti-Israel demonstrations carried a message of death to the Jews, death to Israel? Who would believe that that same message has been painted on synagogue buildings that were also vandalized? Among the many lessons of the Shoah is our understanding that words have meaning and hate cannot be ignored. This museum is an institution of words, images, history, values, education, tolerance, and learning. May it always be a force for good, truth, and a vehicle for peace among all people. Thank you.
Civil rights author and poet Maya Angelou addressed the pain, degradation, and horror of being the object of hatred and bigotry in her poignant and moving poem, Still I Rise. Here to present it today from After School Matters is a talented teenager and rising performer, Sabrina Walker.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness. But still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I'll rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I'll rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide. Welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I'll rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I'll rise. I'll rise. I rise. Thank you.
Nearly 150 years ago, with the American experiment endangered, a son of Illinois made sure that it would continue, and in a way that reflected the value of human dignity. Not because it was idealistic, Abraham Lincoln told us, but because it was necessary for our survival. As he once asked, "When you have extinguished a soul, are you quite sure that the demon you have roused will not turn on you?" Now, more than a century later, we come together in the land of Lincoln, and we are joined by the governor of Illinois, Pat Quinn, a great student of our 16th president, a champion of this museum, and a person who has long and ably served the public interest. Last year, about to embark on a trade mission to Poland, Pat Quinn thoughtfully called our office and asked if he could lead a group of survivors to visit one of the camps. He did so quietly and without fanfare, as is his way. He wanted to learn even more about the Holocaust survivor experience and about what happened to their family members who became victims of the Nazi final solution. In doing so, he became an even better friend of this cause and this movement. I am so grateful for all that he has done, and it is my supreme pleasure to introduce to you Governor Pat Quinn.
It's an honor to be here today on behalf of the people of the land of Lincoln, our state of Illinois. Almost 13 million people live in our state. It is a special honor to have the Holocaust Museum and Education Center located here in Illinois. Our late and great poet laureate, Gwendolyn Brooks, once said, "This is the giant hour, and it is the time for gianthood." And I think it is very important as we mark this day, this special day in world history, that we honor and mourn the lives of the victims of the Holocaust, that we thank the survivors for keeping the memory alive, for their tremendous commitment to each other and to all of us to make sure that we understood what evil was and can be, that all of us have a duty on this planet to confront evil and defeat evil. And the only way to do it is with the power of goodness and education. And that is exactly what the Holocaust Museum and Education Center is. As JB mentioned, I went to Poland, to Auschwitz with Fritzie Fritzell, a survivor of Auschwitz, and Ralph Reback. And we, on a sad and a very somber Sunday, much like today, remembered and thanked God for those who would stand against evil, the righteous. And we also visited the site of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and honored those who stood against oppression and evil. And I think it's our duty, the living, in the great words of Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, if we believe in government of the people and by the people and for the people, we must stand against evil wherever it rears its ugly head. In the Talmud, it says, if you save one life, you save the whole world. And I think that is the whole purpose of the Museum and Education Center, to educate all of us to evil and what we can do to stand against it. And the fountain of righteousness, I think it's very important that we honor those who confront and stand against evil. I had a professor in college, John Karski, who stood against the Nazi oppression in Poland. And I had the honor with Fritzie and Ralph to visit Irina Sendler, 97 years old, in Warsaw, who during a terrible time in the 1940s saved 2,500 Jewish children by taking them out of the ghetto and saving their lives. So there are people on this earth who do the right thing. When I was growing up, I remember Jacqueline Kennedy, the widow of our late president, who once said, if you bungle raising your children, nothing else in life matters. It's our duty in the land of Lincoln, Illinois, in the United States of America, and on planet Earth to teach our children and their grandchildren the importance of being righteous, to stand up against evil, to never, ever forget. Thank you very much.
I know a man once known as Shlomek Zhezniak, who at age 9 was a prisoner in the Deblin concentration camp, where he faced the constant threat of starvation and death. To avoid his fate, he used his agility and small size to crawl out after dark under the barbed wire fence and steal potatoes from a nearby warehouse, and return to share his bounty with others. But one night at the warehouse, this brave young boy was confronted by the steel revolver of a Nazi guard. With the gun between his eyes, the little boy stared deep into the guard's eyes, fully expecting to be killed. That is not what happened. For some reason, the guard's grip on the young boy loosened, and Shlomek ran. He climbed down into a ditch and crawled up the other side and back toward the concentration camp. And though liberation for Shlomek did not come that harrowing night, it did come. You see, that little boy had a certain perseverance and unwavering hope that allowed him to survive the concentration camp. It also allowed the creation of this museum, which brings us all here today. Shlomek spent the last 63 years running, not away from a demon, but toward a goal. No ditch has been too deep or too wide for him to get past. He has rallied an ever-growing team of volunteers like me, who are awed by his example and inspired by his unstoppable commitment and determination. Thank God Shlomek is with us today. He is the president of our museum, our friend and our leader. He is better known to all of us as Sam Harris. Did I get it right?
Thank you, JB. The hardest part of your speech was to pronounce Schlamek Zhezhnik. He kept asking me every few minutes, am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? JB, you were fantastic. Let me tell you another thing, JB. We survivors believe that you have earned the title Mensch for your involvement in this magnificent project. Winston Churchill said of the Holocaust, quote, "There is no doubt that this is probably the greatest and most horrible crime ever committed in the whole history of the world," end of quote. We survivors know firsthand Hitler's unprecedented evil bestowed on us, our families, and so many other people. The Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center will serve as a beacon to the world, a beacon of hope where we, our children and grandchildren, will learn from the past and make sure that this or any other kind of Holocaust never happens in the future. One of my prized possessions that influenced my life enormously is a letter I received in July 1999 from President Bill Clinton. He writes, "Dear Sam, this little Polish boy being shot gets a letter from the president, JB. Dear Sam, there will one day come a time when the Holocaust will pass from a living reality and shared experience to memory and history, and each of us has a solemn obligation to ensure that this tragedy is never forgotten. By sharing your personal story, you are helping the world heed the lessons of history, and I thank you for speaking out." End of quote. This letter has been read and appreciated by so many survivors. Is it a coincidence that the year 1999, when this letter was written, is the same year that the local Holocaust survivors voted to build the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center, and that President Clinton is here today? I would say this was beshared, a Yiddish word, as you all know. It means meant to be. I want to thank each of you here in participating through rain and shine to get us to this moment. Thank you.
A child of Holocaust survivors, Cantor Stephen Storr was an early advocate of the Illinois Holocaust Museum, organizing special concerts and musical tributes to remember Holocaust victims and salute their courage and resilience of the survivors. Please welcome Cantor Storr.
For this sacred moment, would you mind, please, if I asked you to rise? Lochen Bamramim Hamitzemenucha Nichona Tachar Kanfei Ashchina B'malot Kedoshim Utehorim Kezoar Rakia Mazhirim Et kol hanshamot Chalele HaShoah Anashim Nashim V'taf Kulam Giborim Shnergu V'shenishchatu V'shennisrefu V'shenitbechu V'shenachnechu Kayim V'shenisepu Ale Kiddush Hashem Anu mitpalalim Leilu Nishmatam Lachein bal harachamim yastireim b'seit knafav liolamim uteror b'torachayim et nishmatam Adonai hu nachlatam v'yizkor lanu akedatam b'ganei dentehei menuchatam Ve'yanuchu b'shalom al pizurei mishkvotam ve'nomar Amen. You may be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, a special video presentation by the President of the United States.
I'm so sorry I can't be with you in person, but it is my great privilege to join all of you in marking the opening of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. This museum, built with help from survivors and supported by so many others, will serve as a lasting memorial to all those who died in the Holocaust and those who lived through it. But it will also help each of us understand what we can do to fight the many forms of injustice and cruelty that persist in our own time. Countless visitors will walk through the rooms of this museum, reminded of a truth that speaks not just to our past, but to our present and our future, that there is no greater obligation than to confront acts of inhumanity, from the concentration camps of Europe to the villages of Darfur, that we each have a responsibility to stand up for our fellow human beings. That's the lesson that school children will learn when they visit this museum, when they read the names inscribed in the Room of Remembrance or sit quietly in the Hall of Reflection, when they recognize that the way to honor those who died is not simply to mourn, but to act, to do our part to prevent these kinds of atrocities from ever happening again. This truth of our common humanity and collective responsibility is one we must continually renew and reaffirm, not only in our words, but in our deeds. That's the mission of this museum. That is a great cause of my presidency, and that must be the ongoing work of our nation in the years to come. Thank you.
Please welcome from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, our partner institution in Washington, D.C., its director, Sarah Bloomfield.
What a special honor it is for me to be sharing this historic occasion with all of you and to culminate all these years of tireless work for the Chicago community. I just want to share with you one personal story about the man I've been asked to introduce, the German ambassador. For many years, survivors came to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and said, "You've told our story to millions all over the world. Sitting on the National Mall, we know you'll be there forever, but you must do one more thing for us before we die. Please help us find out how and when and where our loved ones perished." But the key to this information was held in the International Tracing Service archive in Bad Arolsen, Germany. Created after the war to help victims find families, the tracing service was very slow to respond and often inaccurate. It had a backlog of 400,000 requests. It told survivors to wait. Klaus Schariot is someone who understood that survivors should not have to wait another day. As we at the museum were desperately trying to get all 11 nations that controlled this archive to agree to open its precious contents, Ambassador Schariot stepped up and became our partner in this urgent yet delicate negotiation. His leadership quickly bore fruit, and soon the museum began receiving the first of what will eventually be 100 million digital records. So far, 2,500 individuals from 50 countries have been helped. Imagine what it means after 65 years to finally know when to observe Yahrzeit. For this, we at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum thank our great friend and partner, someone who has demonstrated enormous dedication to Holocaust survivors in so many ways, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, Klaus Schariot. It is my great privilege to welcome him on this historic occasion.
President Clinton, Governor Quinn, Senators, Representatives, Mr. Wiesel, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Harris, Mr. Hirschhaut, Mr. Pritzker, survivors of the Holocaust, friends, and Sarah. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and even more for the great work for all what you're doing in Washington. It has been a pleasure and an honor to work with you and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington over the last few years. Ladies and gentlemen, your kind invitation for me to speak to you today is for me a sign of friendship. It is a generous and humbling expression of your trust in my country. I'm grateful, honored, and deeply touched to be here with you today. As a German and as German ambassador to the United States, I stand here before you with a heavy heart, but also with a heart full of hope. The Holocaust, the murder of 6 million European Jews, is probably the most heinous crime in human history. It is certainly the most shameful period in German history. Germany unequivocally recognizes its historical guilt and responsibility. And I believe this unequivocal recognition has opened the door to a common future for both Germans and Jews. That is why today what matters most is not what separated us in the past, but what unites us now and in the future. We are united in the remembrance of the victims. We are united in the horror that so many people could look away when their neighbors were subjected to injustice and suffering. We're united in our determination to fight anti-Semitism and our staunch support for the State of Israel. Yet above all, we are united in the responsibility for preserving the memory of the past and for a shared, more humane future. I believe that the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center here in Skokie will make an important contribution to this mission. The museum recalls the terror of the past, and the Education Center is working to ensure that such horror will never happen again. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate the Holocaust survivors and other members of the Illinois Holocaust Memorial Foundation and the donors on the opening of this impressive museum, great education center, and wonderful work of art. More than 30 years ago, you stood up against plans to hold a neo-Nazi rally in Skokie and initially established a small Holocaust museum. Over the years, your organization grew and captured the shared imagination and support of an entire community. And looking at the museum that we are opening today, I can only say what an enormous impact you had. You proved that a few brave men and women can indeed make a difference. I'm particularly pleased to be able to tell you that Germany is represented here today, not only by me, but also by 10 other ambassadors from my country. Ten young German women and men who have worked and lived here with you, each of them for a whole year. As volunteers of the German volunteer organization, Action Reconciliation Service for Peace, Katrin Ahnert, Willi Wagner, Till Wagner, Jan Vespermann, Julia Borcherding, Philipp Ademer, Fabian Krohn, Gregor Darmer, Tobias Etzel, and now Bettina Auge have assisted Holocaust survivors in their work at the museum since 1997. Thank you for that applause. I think they really deserve that. They do not bear any guilt for the crimes of the past, but they have assumed responsibility for shaping a better future. And of that, I am very proud. Over the years, many of them became friends with the survivors they lived and worked with. And when it came to decide about where they would stay during their visit to Skokie, no hotels were needed because they were all invited to stay with survivors they had met while working here as volunteers. I think this is the story. This is a wonderful symbol of reconciliation and of what is possible in German-Jewish relations today. Today, Jewish life in Germany is not just a memory, but again, living reality. Over the years, some 240,000 Jews, many from the former Soviet Union, have found a new home with us in Germany. The Jewish community is now larger and more vibrant than ever before since the end of the Second World War. Synagogues and Jewish community centers have been restored and rebuilt all over the country. Thus, my grandchildren will grow up together with Jews, and they will experience Jewish life up close. And that is very, very good. We want to live up to the trust that Jews in Germany and that you today have shown me and my country in the knowledge of the past and with the will to shape a more humane future, our common future. Thank you very much.
As Jewish survivors of the Holocaust looked to rebuild and renew their lives, many sought refuge in the hope and optimism of the new Jewish state of Israel. To help us dedicate the new Illinois Holocaust Museum, a special video presentation by Israeli President Shimon Peres.
The opening of this museum in Chicago is a moving occasion for all of us. How to survive physically and how to maintain our memories spiritually are the two greatest questions for Jewish life and maybe for the entire humanity. The founder of our state, Ben-Gurion, would never forget General Eisenhower, who took him around immediately after the war to visit the camps of the survivors. Eisenhower was so concerned and so humane that he won the admiration of Ben-Gurion to the rest of his life. But Ben-Gurion came back shocked. He saw the faces of the survivors and he learned that all gates are closed to them. They couldn't go anywhere. That was the reason for his decision to drop all other priorities and bring a Jewish state with open gates for survivors as the first priority. But once we survive, we should not forget. We have to survive our memories so it won't be repeated, it won't be forgotten, it won't be ignored as a lesson for every person, for every child, for all humanity. You are now building a place to have our memories survived, to have a vivid lesson to learn from the greatest death spread in such an awful way by the Nazis. In a way, to remember is to survive, and we have to survive to remember. I want really to express the blessings of our country, of our people, for this important occasion, for the support of the Chicago people, Jewish and non-Jewish. We shall remember together, so we shall remain human beings with respect for human beings. Thank you.
Please welcome an extraordinary woman whose courage and grace in the wake of a personal tragedy fueled by hate became an inspiration to us all. Her work honors the memory of her beloved late husband, Ricky Birdsong. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Sherilyn Birdsong.
One of the world's most moving hymns was written by John Newton, a former slave trader, who once said, "I hope it will always be a subject of humiliating reflection to me that I was once an active instrument in a business at which my heart now shudders." Newton poured this deep remorse into his music and wrote the haunting spiritual classic, Amazing Grace. The words in it carry a well-recognized message of redemption, that each of us is capable of changing ourselves and thereby the world, a concept our new Illinois Holocaust Museum hopes to foster. It is my pleasure to welcome back the Soul Children of Chicago performing Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved and set me free. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Now you can join us in this part. It says, praise God, praise God. You can stand up on your feet and join us if you would like to, and just sing it with us. Praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God. You can stand there and we can just say that together. For every survivor, you can say, praise God, praise God, praise God, praise God. Oh, praise God. Praise God. For all that He's done. For everything that He's done for us. We give God the praise. We bless our God. Adonai, we praise Him. Oh, praise God. Praise God. Praise God. Praise God.
Written in the visitor's book at Israel's Holocaust Memorial are the words, "This museum is a testament to the power of truth in the face of denial, the resilience of the human spirit in the face of despair, the triumph of the Jewish people over murder and destruction, and a reminder to all people that the lessons of the Holocaust must never be forgotten." Those words were written by the highest-ranking American official to have ever visited the museum from the new administration, Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Good afternoon, everyone. The dedication of the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center marks a milestone for the citizens of my native state. Moments like this don't happen without years of work, and I want to congratulate all those who helped make this institution a reality. I want to say a special thanks to the museum staff, board members, campaign chairman J.B. Pritzker, and Holocaust survivors, including Sam Harris, Aaron Elster, and Barbara Steiner. Beginning today, your work on this project will touch thousands of lives. It will help all those who visit this place to understand the horrors of the Shoah, and also our shared responsibility to banish the crime of genocide from humanity. We must never forget the millions who cannot be here, who cannot be with Sam and Aaron and Barbara and other survivors. In their memory, we must build memorials of understanding, of compassion, and of action on behalf of human rights and human dignity. The Illinois Holocaust Museum, with its call to remember the past and transform the future, is a memorial that will stand the test of time. I want to thank you again for your work and your commitment to use the lessons of the Holocaust to educate and inspire each of us to work toward a better future. Thank you, and God bless you. Good afternoon, everyone. The dedication of the God bless you.
To introduce our featured speaker, Nobel Laureate Professor Elie Wiesel, please welcome the Illinois Holocaust Museum's Project and Executive Director, Richard Hirschout.
Good afternoon. Jewish tradition speaks to having two names in a lifetime. The name we are given at birth and the name we make for ourselves through our deeds. For the millions of innocent victims of the Holocaust, Jewish and non-Jewish, whose names were brutally stripped away, today we remember their humanity. To the survivors who rebuilt their lives in the aftermath of the Shoah, your names teach us the noblest attributes of humanity: courage, resilience, optimism, and empathy. And to the precious few who stepped forward to rescue those who otherwise would have faced certain death, their good names will be forever inscribed on our wall of the righteous. Today, we commit all our names to ensuring that this magnificent new museum stands at the forefront of the struggle for human dignity. Today, as we remember the courageous fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto, may we bring fresh energy and renewed determination to fulfilling the promise of never again. In a world still beset by the ravages of genocide, is there any greater gift we can give our children than the impulse not to stand idly by in the face of evil and injustice? This is our moral imperative, and there is no greater inspiration for this work than the extraordinary individual I am privileged to introduce to you now. It is the honor of a lifetime to present to you our very special guest, Professor Elie Wiesel. No single individual has more poignantly conveyed the horror and the humanity of those who suffered during the Holocaust. Elie Wiesel's wrenching accounts of his journey through these dark years makes achingly personal the enormity of this catastrophe. Long before the events of Skokie became the catalyst for the Holocaust education movement in this country, millions of young people, myself among them, were riveted by his haunting memoirs, Night and Dawn. Through the decades that followed the end of the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel has devoted every fiber of his being to fulfilling the sacred oath of never again to any people at any time. A more compelling voice of conscience does not exist. His steadfast resolve, gift with words both written and spoken, and genuine sense of obligation to repairing the world sets a remarkable example for us all. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Elie Wiesel.
April 19, 1993. It was a rainy day in Washington. And that was the first time President Clinton and I shared a platform together. It was the inauguration of the museum, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. I remember it well because it was an important event. Some of us have invested years of our life in building that museum. So my wonderful and beautiful wife, Marion, and I spent the entire night working on my address. It was supposed to be an important address. 36 presidents were there, live television. But as my turn came to speak, I opened my folder and I almost had a heart attack. My speech was soaked, impossible to read. For a long moment I hesitated what to do. I had a choice. Try to remember what I wrote, or improvise a new one. And it was no other way. I improvised. In the middle of my address, I turned to the president. I said to him, Mr. President, a few weeks ago I just came back from Sarajevo, from Bosnia, and what I have seen robbed me of my sleep, and I began telling him of what I had seen, and I pleaded with him. You must do something to stop the bloodshed there. I was waiting for the end of the ceremony, and that was the beginning of our relationship. And that was the beginning of the end of the war in the Balkans. I'm telling you this story because you are just beginning here. And I congratulate all of you for this beginning. I believe in beginnings. We Jews have learned that there are two mysteries. The mystery of the beginning, Maaseh Bereshit, and the eschatological beginning of redemption. And the two are linked by memory. And therefore, whatever you do is of extraordinary importance to all of us, because you never can know the impact and the consequences of a word, an image, a sentence, a prayer, or a smile. When you will enter this museum, you will think, when you leave, now we know. I plead with you, don't say that. You will have to say, no, we don't know. You will learn here how it was done. Because to our great embarrassment, educated people, some of them with college degrees and even with doctoral degrees, were among the commanders of the most infamous murder units, the Einsatzkommandos. Some of them came from aristocratic families, with good upbringing, and they became the worst, the most sadistic tormentors of Jewish children, killing and killing day after day. How could they? But you will learn at least the machinery, because there was a kind of system. I remember when I arrived, what astounded me during the days, that here was a place, a kind of creation alongside creation, where people came to die just as others came to kill. And it worked. The system worked. In my time, 10 to 12,000 men, women, children were gassed every single day and night. It worked. So you will know how. Because they prepared it to put us in cattle cars for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, in certain cases, 8 days, to fatigue the victim. So when the victim arrived in Birkenau at the ramp, that victim no longer knew what was happening. And therefore, it went so easily. But you will not know why it happened. Nobody knows why. Why has the event taken place? It could have been prevented, at least in my case, Hungarian Jews. Our tragedy began when the war was almost over. We are now 2 days, 3 days after Passover. That's when the ghetto was beginning to be built in my town. The last week of May, we were deported. 1944, a few days before D-Day, when the entire world, the entire free world already knew what it meant to be there. We knew, they knew, we didn't. We simply thought we were going to a labor camp inside Hungary. But in Washington and in London and the Vatican and in Switzerland and in Sweden, and the newspapers, check your local papers, you will see. They already spoke about Auschwitz, and inside pages, mind you, and the New York Times forever will be blamed for that, the way it handled the news of that event. Why didn't we know? You spoke about good people who helped. We had a maid, an illiterate woman, a Christian. She brought honor to Christianity. And she sneaked into the ghetto. And I will remember forever. She pleaded with my father. She said, I have a hut in the mountains. Come, I'll take care of you. The Russian army, the Red Army, was maybe 20, 30 miles away. But we didn't know where we were going. My father said, whatever will happen to our people, I want it to happen to us too, in Hungary. Had we known, half, if not more, of many communities would have been saved. Why didn't we know? Yes, there was a war going on, and we are grateful. We must always remain grateful for what America has done during the war. It was a great, valiant, heroic, noble victory to defeat Nazism, Hitler, fascism. And whenever my wife and I go to Normandy, we go to the military cemeteries with a sadness that you can imagine, but also with the pride you can imagine. Kids, 16, 18-year-old soldiers, coming from places they have never known, trying to save places whose names they never heard of. A great war. But when it came to save Jews, unfortunately, the indifference was part of the plan. In Berlin, they thought the world is indifferent to the Jewish plight. That was the lesson they learned from the famous Evian conference. So what have we learned? What has the world learned? And the question is, we survivors have tried our best. Those of you here in Illinois have courageously shown to your fellow Americans the importance, the essential obligation of memory everywhere. Has the world learned the lesson? And sadly, I must confess, the answer is no. Had the world learned the lesson, there would have been no Cambodia, and no Rwanda, and no Darfur, and no Bosnia, and no racism, and no anti-Semitism, and no Nazi marches here in Skokie. But we must learn now certain very simple lessons, that whatever happens to one community affects all communities. Some people believed, oh, it's only the Jews. Oh, no. Kafka said, when a Jew is slapped in the face, it is all humanity that falls on its knees. Yes, pogroms. Yes, evacuation. Yes, deportation. Jews were the first victims, but the effect was much larger than that. The universal implication and application was there. So therefore, when you enter this place, remember that life is not made of years, but of moments. Let every moment here be one that will guide your conduct. We have heard from previous speakers that we have celebrated life. Yes, we have. It's the biblical command. You shall choose life. It also means you shall choose the living. We must think of the living. And therefore, whenever and wherever living human beings suffer, we must do something to honor their dignity. Wherever communities are humiliated, we must come to their defense. And wherever people live in fear, we must be there to alleviate their fear. We must do whatever we can that our children, when they grow up and they enter this place, they will learn the lesson with sadness, but also with hope. Remember Pandora's box. There are so many curses, so many maledictions, but at the bottom of the box, there is hope. So what is the hope? The hope is that we learn. Therefore, the word educational is so important to me. Learn. So why the event? Who knows why? Maybe God Himself knows. But I humbly tell you that if anyone were to come to me and say, this is why it happened, I will not accept the answer. Because the answer would be so horrendous that it would fill our lives with infinite fear. And this is something I do not believe in. I believe, in spite of everything, that the passerby is not my enemy. I believe that the Christian or the Muslim or the Buddhist or the Armenian, whose memory has to be protected, that whatever the person is, whoever that person is, he or she is my companion. And ultimately, if that person learns from my memory, it is only for the good and the welfare of our children. We have also learned gratitude. After the war, when I came to France, I didn't stop saying thank you to my teachers, to the educators, To the person in the street, simply thank you for remaining human. Thank you, you who are here today, for strengthening that faith in humanity simply by looking at you and at one another. Thank you.
From one great world peacemaker to another. At the very core of President Bill Clinton's life is a fundamental value, that we are all created equal. Significantly, Bill Clinton didn't first encounter this value at Georgetown or at Yale or at Oxford, but instead as a child in a Hope, Arkansas grocery store, his grandfather's store. There, a little boy watched a good man treat everyone who walked in the door with kindness and respect. Some of them were white and others were African American. All were welcome and made to feel welcome. Right there in the heart of the segregationist South, young Bill Clinton saw it very clearly. No person or people has a monopoly on dignity. When he went out into the world, he took that lesson with him, and as President of the United States of America, the little boy from the corner store became a world peacemaker. His administration brought reconciliation to Northern Ireland, stopped a war and genocide in Bosnia, and saved a people from ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. And from the first days of his presidency until the very last, he worked relentlessly to end Middle Eastern conflict. In all of these disputes, he has invited people to find within themselves forgiveness. For Bill Clinton has always known that peace begins in the heart. When we do not hate, we do not destroy. When his presidency ended, his service did not. Having been so immersed in resolving ethnic rivalries and epic disputes, President Clinton believed more than ever that we needed to recognize our shared challenges and possibilities. So he formed the William J. Clinton Foundation, and its accomplishments are staggering, including providing 34 million people with access to treatment for tropical diseases and reducing malnutrition among more than 42 million children around the globe. And beyond these and other tangible accomplishments, Bill Clinton has turned loose an inspiring idea. We are bound by our common humanity. Now, with all the good that he has done and all the good that he will do, maybe it's too much to say that none of it would have been possible without the early lesson in the grocery store in Hope, Arkansas. But as we think about the Holocaust survivors and how they've challenged us to act upon what their experience can teach, this much is all too clear. Bill Clinton knows well that a lesson learned can shape a life and change the world. It is my great privilege to introduce to you President Bill Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, JB. Elie, Marion, thank you for the wonderful talk and for reminding people that you did tell me at the dedication of the Holocaust Museum in Washington that America had to stop the Bosnian genocide. Governor Quinn, Senator Burris, members of Congress and the General Assembly, to all the officers of the Holocaust Museum, Attorney General Madigan, Secretary of State White, Comptroller Hines, Mayor Van Dusen, I'm honored to be in Skokie and honored by the response of this community 30 years ago and today. I want to thank Sam Harris and all the officials of the museum and the survivors who made this possible. I'd like to thank the German ambassador for coming here, along with all the consul generals from Israel, Central Europe, Venezuela, Japan, and elsewhere. And all of you whose gifts, whether they're received memories or cold cash, made today possible. Before I came over, and I've been backstage listening to most of the program, but I got a tour of this magnificent museum. And it strikes me as not only appropriate but necessary that it is both a place of remembrance and learning. For it requires both to truly be able to say never again. Never again, not just for Jews, but for all who suffer and die simply because of their identities, their religion, their race, their ethnicity, their gender, their sexual orientation, simply because of who they are. People have been dying because of who they are for a very long time. You heard Elie Wiesel say that he used the dedication of the Washington, D.C. Holocaust Memorial to urge me to do something to stop the Bosnian genocide. We did, but only after 250,000 people had died and 2.5 million had been rendered refugees. We acted more quickly in Kosovo, but far too late in Rwanda, where 10% of the country was slaughtered, mostly by machetes, in just 90 days. I think it's important that this place of remembrance and learning is here. Not only because of what happened in Skokie 3 decades ago, but because it is in the heartland of the country. We don't want the only people remembering and learning to be in Washington, New York, and Los Angeles. The heartland of America needs to know the same thing. I was astonished by the beauty of the buildings, the power of the artifacts, the oral histories, and the wonderful historical record. Even though I've been to Yad Vashem 3 or 4 times and been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington twice and was there when we opened the one in New York City and have toured the offices of the Shoah Foundation, I still learn something in your place today. There is always more to learn. It struck me as particularly significant that this will be one of the last, if not the very last, museum to be built in the United States with the direct memories and participation of survivors. Still, as long as this museum stands, every person who enters its doors will be enlightened and empowered by those direct memories. It's one of the reasons I am so grateful to my friend Steven Spielberg for the work he's done with the Shoah Foundation, collecting as many of them from around the world as possible before it's too late. The Holocaust literally transformed how people thought about the 20th century. It dashed forever the Enlightenment dream that evil could somehow be permanently banished by reason. It proved that the struggle against the baser tendencies of human nature must be fought and contained in every generation. For deep within every person, in different ways, the forces of light and darkness do battle. When the darker forces prevail, the capacity for evil arises. That must always be remembered and always opposed. That's why the mission of the museum to teach visitors about other genocides, such as those in Darfur, Rwanda, Cambodia, and elsewhere, is so profoundly important. We're now more than a half-century past the Holocaust, living in history's most interdependent age, in which divorcing ourselves from the problems of other people is neither a moral nor a practical option. We have a heavy obligation to prevent future genocides, to keep others from dying before their time. As two of my former cabinet secretaries, Madeleine Albright and Bill Cohen, wrote in their recently released Genocide Prevention Task Force report, we must honor the memory of past victims by encouraging future action. Preventing genocide is possible, and striving to do so is imperative. It is not enough simply to refrain from doing evil. We must seek it out, stand against it, and do our part to build a more just and decent world where no one faces death or persecution. Simply because of who they are, how they worship, what their gender is, whom they love. Our 21st century has its own unique challenges arising directly from our interdependence. And they're enough to keep us busy without our being diverted into the foolishness of destruction by identity. Think of the problems that are directly rooted in our interdependence. Significant inequalities in incomes, education, and healthcare. Instability from terror, organized crime, narco-trafficking, weapons of mass destruction, and as we all now know, over-leveraged and under-regulated financial markets around the world. The utter unsustainability of the way we use energy in the face of climate change. All these things need to be dealt with on the merits because they challenge livelihoods and threaten lives. But it is very important to remember, though I agree with Elie that no one can answer fully the question, why did this happen? We know that the more people are stressed out by challenges to their own identity and their own security, the more fertile ground is laid for future identity-based violence. Still, we know conditions alone did not create the Holocaust. The capacity for evil has to be stirred. The most ripe targets for the stirring are masses of people who are insecure. Insecure psychologically, insecure financially, insecure politically. They're more vulnerable to false claims by power mongers. The Jews were targeted by Hitler to a group of Germans who were humiliated by their defeat in World War I, by the harsh peace thereafter, by a badly broken economy in the Weimar Republic. They were told that they were a master race, held back by the pollution of the Jews and the gypsies and the gays and anybody else who disagreed with Hitler. They were told that only by ridding their society of their impurities could they rise to their clear historical destiny. Many years later, here in Skokie, the neo-Nazis, if you really looked at them, and neo-Nazi groups in Europe and other hate groups around the world, they basically were made up of angry, uncertain, insecure people looking for someone else to blame, cultivating in their own minds a phony victimhood to justify hurting others. Genocide is invariably the offspring of a marriage between insecure people and ruthless demagogues. Let's take one I know quite a lot about, Rwanda, where I now work with my foundation to fight AIDS and help people make a living and increase their incomes. The Tutsis and their Hutu sympathizers were butchered by the hundreds of thousands, about 800,000 of them in just 90 days. They were killed, as I said, mostly by machetes, by people run amok, not only in Kigali, the capital, but throughout the country where there was no formal resistance, because the people were convinced to turn against the Tutsis, representing only 15% of the population of the country. How could they have threatened it? But they were disproportionately successful in business and in academia and politics. Sound familiar? And the rank and file Hutu citizens were told, oh, the Tutsis are coming after you. Now they're going to try to take over everything. They're going to try to dominate you. They're going to kill and jail people arbitrarily. You better strike back first. And so the whirlwind was reaped. The good news is it doesn't have to end there. After the perpetrators of genocide were defeated by Rwandans, Rwanda rose above its differences to build a shared society, to share the government, to share the bounty of the land. Families who were on both sides of the divide now live side by side in reconciliation villages where you can actually get a free piece of land to build a house, but only if you agree to live next door to someone who was on the other side. I went back to Rwanda for the first time after I left the White House, and I'll never forget it. I saw two women holding hands. One woman, a Tutsi, had lost her brother and father. Her next-door neighbor, whom she had come to love, had a husband in prison awaiting war crimes trial for being one of the major perpetrators of the genocide. I met a young Hutu who had been involved in the killing and had fled to the Congo. And I asked him why he had come home. He said, because my president said I was needed. And if I was not a leader, I would be punished by my fellow townspeople. So he came back and agreed to live next to a member of the other ethnic group, and he told the truth to a town reconciliation council, and they gave him an atonement assignment for 2 years. And he was made whole with his fellow Rwandans. I'll never forget, this is not easy. But I went to Rwanda as president, and I apologized to them because I did not get involved there until all we could do was to save people in the camps. And 10% of the people were already dead. And I had 6 survivors with me. They told stories not altogether unlike the stories you can see on your tour here. But one was particularly amazing. A beautiful woman in a resplendent, bright-colored dress of the African Lake Country, extremely dignified with no visible scars, told me that she had been hacked on the back by a machete and was bleeding profusely around her spine and had been left for dead after their next-door neighbors had sold them out. He said, our children played together, we had holiday meals together, we thought we were friends, but they were afraid when the butchers came and they said, where are the Tutsis? They sold us out. She said, I awoke in a sea of my own blood to see my husband and 6 children lying dead around me. And I screamed out in anger to God that I had been spared. And then I realized I must have been spared for a reason. And it could not be something as mean as vengeance. So I do what I can to help us begin again. She took orphan children from all ethnic groups and raised them until they could be put in permanent families. There's a woman that runs a basket weaving cooperative in Rwanda who lost 7 of her 10 children in the genocide, and her husband. Only the 3 oldest children survived because they were in the military and off somewhere when all the killing started. One day, a 26-year-old man who worked in her basket weaving cooperative, which contained Hutus and Tutsis, came to see her and broke down in tears. He said, you've been so good to me. I can't stay here any longer. I can't do this. I have to confess, I killed one of your children. And I know you have a son in the army still. If you want him to come and kill me, I will understand and I will stay here until he comes for your justice. And this woman looked at him and said, what good would that do? I forgive you. Get up and go back to work. How many of us could do that? What was it about her identity that freed her to do that? What made Nelson Mandela believe he could actually have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission after all the terrible things that had happened? That he could put the leaders of all the apartheid parties in his government after all the terrible things that had happened? Because he knew that once you stop the worst, you have to somehow go about finding the best in everyone who's still left. That's the real challenge facing so many places today. I got here in time to see Hillary's videotape, and she called me right before I left our home today because she and President Obama are down in Trinidad at the Summit of the Americas. And I told her, I said, remember now, I'm going to this Holocaust museum. She said, I know, tell them I said hello. And I said, so if you think you can't make up with Hugo Chavez and those other guys, that's a tea party compared. We're laughing, but I'm serious. We all get so puffed up with our own specialness that our negative identities trump our positive ones. But think of the challenges facing Israel today, and what is at the root of them? The Iranian nuclear program. Are we supposed to take Ahmadinejad seriously when he has a meeting that's designed to call into question the Holocaust, which you have so powerfully documented? And if not, what are you supposed to do about it? Can Israel, as the new Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, wants to do, actually make some progress on peace with Syria after all they've done to empower the Iranian mischief through their agents? Most important of all, how can you keep moving toward peace with the Palestinians who still believe in the promise of peace? Remember, the Israeli government recently showered compliments on the Palestinian government in the West Bank because of its conduct during the Gaza operations and what a good job they did in preserving security. But the question is, what happens now? The Palestinians had a prime minister who gave them the first government they've had, which was both competent and strong and honest. In the past, those of you who are familiar with it know we've had governments that were competent and strong but not honest, and governments that were honest but not competent and strong. They actually had the whole shooting match, and they performed superbly on the security front. But the West Bank Palestinians, the Fatah movement, they gave up violence, and all they have left is economics and politics. What is Israel to do? The Hamas strategy is to make certain that Israel will have an endless list of political reasons never to give political and economic progress, by just having enough violence always to take their eye off the ball. What do you do when you're trying to prevent the conditions which could create a future genocide for the survivors of the last one, and you're trying to deal in good faith with the legitimate claims of people who have reached out the olive branch, and the mischief maker believes he can control your policy? That is the dilemma facing us today. We cannot let the terrorists who really want everything to go straight to hell and a new conflagration prevail. Remember, the population balance is tilting against the Israeli Jews. Poverty is rising, and those rockets are notoriously inaccurate today, but in some not too distant tomorrow will have the equivalent of GPS positioning on them. I say all this because as a Christian, I honestly believe God meant for Jews to have a permanent home in the Holy Land. I believe after all the genocide and the endless persecutions suffered in the diaspora everywhere, after the uprooting of the Babylonian captivity and the horrible violence wreaked on Jews, not Arab Muslims, by the Christian soldiers of the First Crusade who got to Jerusalem and torched a synagogue with 300 men, women, and children in it. The Jews have earned the right to live in peace with their neighbors. How will you sort this through? I didn't come to offer the answers today, but to say one part of it has to be in not only the memory, but the education that will take place in places like this, and that every one of us can be a part of. At the end of my second term as president, I was very proud that the United States was part of an international science consortium that finally succeeded in sequencing the human genome. The whole blueprint of life. It has enormous practical consequences. And I thank the members of the Congress who are here for their recent extraordinarily generous support for the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health and all those who do this work. But we're getting close to unraveling the mysteries of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So already the two genomic variances that are the highest predictors of breast cancer in women have been identified. We're not far away from the day when both mastectomies and deaths from breast cancer will be a thing of the past because of this genomic advance. But the relevance for you today is this. The most interesting thing to me as a layperson is that the first report said that genetically every living human being on earth is 99.9% the same. That is, every difference you can see among us in this crowd, from our skin color to our hair color, or whether we have hair, to whether we need eyeglasses, to how big or small we are, can all be found in 1/10 of 1% of our genetic makeup, even our gender. Everything else is the same. Now, a recent study by an independent group of scientists says, oh, they're all wet. In fact, we're only 99.5% the same. Now, look, with 3 billion genomes, 0.4% is scientifically significant. But politically and psychologically and philosophically, it's nothing. So, that's what I ask you to think about. Life is short enough as it is, without being further shortened or irrevocably scarred by identity conflicts over 1/10 of 1% of what we can see in each other. God gave us the other 1/10 of 1% to make life more interesting, not more lethal. And none of us should ever let a bunch of politicians, again, stampede us into hating someone else because of who they are. As if we don't matter unless there's somebody somewhere we can look down on. Turns out the scriptures were smarter than the scientists. They figured it out much longer ago. The Torah says, he who turns away from a stranger might as well turn away from the Most High God. My Christian New Testament says the greatest of all commandments is to love the Lord with all your mind and heart. And the second is, quote, like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. The Quran says Allah put different peoples on the earth, not that they might despise one another, but that they might come to know one another and learn from one another. That's one of those surahs I think our friends in Iran sometimes forget to read. The Dhammapada of the Buddha says no one is fully human until he feels the arrow piercing another's skin as if it had entered his own body. The lesson of this museum, the debt we owe to those who died and to those who survived and bravely told their own stories here, the debt we owe to those who will come after us is pretty simple. We must teach them, our children, that there can be no mind without heart, no passion without soul, no learning without wisdom, and no conviction without action. Thank you, and God bless you all.
To deliver today's closing benediction, we are proud to have with us a leading light in advancing understanding of the Holocaust among people of all faiths. Ladies and gentlemen, Father John Polakowski.
Lord God, we gather here this afternoon in this week of National Holocaust Remembrance to dedicate a museum to memory and to commitment. We must remember, as your servant Elie Wiesel has reminded us, that to forget the victims of the Holocaust is in fact to kill them a second time. But we realize that memory, while so very important, is not enough. We must not just remember the past, we must also commit ourselves to the present and to the future. So as we celebrate the opening of this important structure and ask God's blessings on all who made it possible, we likewise pledge to fight against anti-Semitism wherever and whenever it raises its ugly head. We promise to oppose any effort to regard any victim group as unfortunate expendables, as were the Jews, the Poles, the Roma, gay people, and the disabled during the Nazi era. May God strengthen all of us in this sacred responsibility.